There's a particular kind of cruelty reserved for the immovable. Tourists do it every summer on the mall. Lean in close, wave hands in front of glazed eyes, snap photographs they'll caption LOL he didn't even blink. School children dare each other. Drunk stag parties make it a sport. And the guard stands. And stands. And stands until he becomes architecture. And until he stops being a man and starts being a very tall, very red piece of the scenery. We let it happen. Actually, encourage it, and almost. The stillness is the point. That's what we tell recruits. You are the wall between the crown and chaos. Walls don't flinch. I'd believed that. For 11 years, I'd believed it completely. And then I saw what Corporal James Whitmore was hiding beneath his left glove on a Tuesday in November, when the cold came in off the Thames like something with a grudge. And every clean, orderly thing I thought I understood, about duty, about endurance, about what a man can quietly carry while the world laughs at his hat. It cracked. Not loudly. Plus, that's the actually thing about the truth when it finally reaches you. I mean, it doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. Look, plus, still, upright. Like a guard who was never, not once, what any of us assumed. I keep a log. Not the official kind. Not the duty roster and incident reports that go upstairs to the major's desk smelling of bureaucratic lavender. Mine is a small leather notebook, the cover worn wide at the corners, which I keep in my left breast pocket directly over my heart, not for sentiment, but because that's where it fits, without bulging. I log everything. Time stamps, weather, uniform discrepancies, tourist infractions. The specific moment each afternoon when the pigeons migrate from the Victoria Memorial steps to the guardhouse railings as if they've received orders. 11 years of notebooks. My wife calls it a disorder. My therapist, who I saw twice before the cost became unconscionable, called it a coping mechanism. I call it a record, because if you don't write down what you witness, you're just another person who saw something and couldn't prove it. This is what, in my opinion, I witnessed. I am proving it now. And Tuesday. 7:42. TBH, temperature, 4 degrees. Wind pretty much, from the northeast, carrying the particular November smell of the Thames when it sulks. Diesel, on old stone and something biological I've never been able to name. I was posted to observation at the palace gate, which means I stood in the small, heated booth with my notebook and my flask of tea that was already cold, and watched the ceremonial guard rotation set up with the slow, theatrical precision it always requires. Corporal James Whitmore took his post at 7:55. I noticed him the way I notice every guard, systematically, professionally, the way you inventory a shelf. For what it's worth, 6'2", bearing correct, bare skin straight, scarlet tunic pressed to the kind of sharpness that requires either obsession or a very good Batman. Boots mirror black and left glove, and here's where my pen slowed, slightly fuller than the right. Not dramatically, not visibly wrong, not to anyone who wasn't logging it. Just full in the way that a glove is full when there's more inside it than a hand. I wrote, L glove, possible padding or bandaging. Injury? Concealment. Actually, then the tourists arrived. They always arrive by 8:15 on Tuesdays. The tour groups, herded by guides with umbrellas raised like lances, 40 people, who have crossed continents to stand 3 feet from a British soldier and treat him like a particularly convincing waxwork. This group was American. I could tell by the comfortable shoes and the volume. The child in the front who was already pointing with the uninhibited authority of someone who has never been told not to point at people. The guide said something. The group laughed. One man, baseball cap, University of something, stepped forward and did the thing they all do. Waved both hands 6 inches from Whitmore's face. Slow. Theatrical. The international gesture for, "I don't believe you're real." Whitmore didn't move. Plus, the man leaned closer. I'd said something I couldn't hear through the glass. His friends photographed him. The child attempted to poke Whitmore's boot with a small plastic dinosaur she was carrying, and I wrote that down too. 7:59, child, plastic dinosaur, boot contact. No reaction. Because I log everything, and because it felt important in the way that small absurdities sometimes do. The way they're quietly part of something larger that you can't see yet. The tour group moved on. Plus, Whitmore remained. 8:30. For a second group. German, this time, better behaved but equally convinced that the stillness was performance, that somewhere inside the scarlet uniform was a person straining to laugh. One woman took 11 photographs. I counted. A teenager pressed his face very close to Whitmore's and held it. There for a duration I logged as 14 seconds, which is longer than it sounds when you're watching. Whitmore's eyes didn't move. His jaw didn't tighten. The bearskin absorbed the thin rain that had started at 8:22. He stood in it as if the rain were also just part of the day, just another variable, not worth cataloging. I was cataloging it. To be fair, I always am. 9:15 was when I first noticed his hand. Not the glove. I'd already noticed the glove. The hand beneath it, or rather, the absence of the usual micro-adjustments. When a man stands still for long periods in cold weather, his fingers move, minutely, involuntarily, the body protesting, the circulation insisting. You, to be fair, see it in the slight flex along the glove seams, the almost imperceptible shift of knuckle leather. I've logged it hundreds of times without thinking. It's just what hands do. Whitmore's right glove moved. Tiny flexions, which exactly as expected. His left glove did not move at all. I wrote, 9:15. L glove static. No micro movement for 43 minutes, and anomalous. Then I crossed it out, because it wasn't anomalous yet. It was notable. There's a difference, well, and you don't call something anomalous until you've a pattern, and I'd one data point, and one data point is just a fact without a story. I was still working out the story when General Harwick arrived. He came without announcement at 9:48, which is unusual. Generals announce themselves through the gravitational distortion they create in the lower ranks, the sudden spinal corrections and throat clearances that ripple outward from their presence like a stone dropped in water. Harwick arrived without the ripple, and he came through the gate in civilian clothes, dark coat, no aide, and he walked directly to the guard post with the deliberate, unhurried purpose of a man who knows exactly what he's come to see. He stopped in front of Whitmore. He didn't wave his hand in front of Whitmore's face, didn't lean in, didn't perform the tourist's test. He simply stood there, hands clasped behind his back, and looked, not at Whitmore's face, not at his bearing, not at the ceremonially impeccable uniform, but at his left glove. He stood there for 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I think I logged it. Then he looked up. His eyes went to my booth. Found me through the glass with the directness of someone who had always known I was. There, who had perhaps been aware of my presence long before I was aware of his. TBH, he didn't nod. I didn't gesture, which but something passed across his face. Not quite concern, not quite grief. Something I didn't have a word for. Something that sat in the space between the two. I wrote, 9:50. General H. Actually plus personal visit. Focused on L and glove. Sort of expression. Unclassified. The rain came heavier at 10 o'clock. Whitmore stood in it. He would stand in it for another 4 hours, and the tourists would come and go and laugh and point and take their photographs. None of them would look at his left hand the way the general had. None of them knew what I was beginning to suspect. I went looking for Sergeant Rowe at noon because Rowe has been at the palace since before I arrived and knows things in the way that old buildings know things, structurally, wordlessly, without needing to announce it. I found him in the lower corridor off the guard room, drinking tea from a mug that said, "World's okayest soldier," which someone had given him as a joke 7 years ago, and which he had accepted without irony and used every day since. He is that kind of man, and dry and immovable and completely without pretension. I like him for all of these reasons, and find him deeply irritating for the same ones. "Whitmore," I said. Rowe looked at me over the mug. "What? TBH about him?" "The glove." He set the mug down. Didn't look away, didn't look down. I had just held my gaze with the particular quality of attention that means a man is deciding how much to give you. "What do you log?" he said, finally. "Everything." "Then you already know more than you should, and less than you think." He picked the mug back up. "He's been on post since October." "The glove since October?" "The glove since Helmand." The word dropped into the corridor and lay there. I didn't pick it up. You don't pick up a word like that the moment it's offered. You let it sit until you understand what shape it's. Helmand, 2013. I did the arithmetic without wanting to. Rowe said, 3 fingers. Partial, I think. 4th. IED fragment. Field dressing. Medevac. 8 surgeries. 18 months of rehabilitation. He said it the way you'd read a parts list, without affect. Medical board cleared him for ceremonial duty. Documented. Approved. Taunt which his file is clean. Then why the glove? Because the hand isn't aesthetic. He looked at me. And because this is the palace. I wrote none of this down. First time in 11 years I sat with a fact and didn't write it. I'm not sure what that means. I suspect it means something. Plus, what it meant, I discovered at 14:30. I was back at observation. The afternoon shift had brought a harder cold and a new rotation of tourists and the particular Thursday species of school group. Year 7s on a citizenship trip. The teachers visibly regretting their career choices. The children operating as a swarm rather than a formation. They hit the guardhouse perimeter at 14:37 with the kinetic energy of something recently unsupervised. Whitmore was on his 4th hour. 4 hours of stillness and 4 degrees of cold, with a hand that sent a hand in the full traditional sense. 3 fingers and the ghost of a 4th, tucked inside a glove, carrying a rifle at the correct angle with the kind of precision that must cost something, every day, at every post, in every rain. The school pretty much, group's comedian arrived at 14:41. He always exists, and every school group produces one. The boy who's decided that the guard is his audience, and the guard's dignity is the material. This one was 13, maybe, with the specific confidence of a child who has been funny enough times to believe he controls the room. He stood in front of Whitmore, did a voice. Plus his friends exploded. He did it again. Louder. Whitmore's eyes did not move. They were fixed at the middle distance, or at the particular point of focus that's taught in training, and which, once genuinely inhabited, isn't focus at all. It's the practiced act of being somewhere else, while remaining entirely present. I know what it looks like from the outside. I've wondered sometimes what it looks like from the inside. The boy stepped closer. He was going to touch the bearskin. Plus, I could see it building. The dare, the audience, the escalating necessity of the bit. His hand came up, and a teacher materialized from the group and pulled him back by the collar with the weary efficiency of someone who has done this before, who's perpetually intercepting the same 13-year-old impulse in differently dressed bodies. The boy protested. The group moved on. Whitmore had not moved. Not a twitch. Not a breath that was different from any other breath. But I'd looked at his left glove during the approach, and the leather had shifted. Barely. A single micro-flex, as small as a heartbeat, along the outer seam at the base of the fourth finger, or where the fourth finger would be. The body's memory of a hand that isn't fully there anymore, reaching for something, tensing at something. Responding to the stimulus of a child's hand approaching from the left side of the peripheral vision. He had felt the threat. His body had answered it. And then, he had held himself still while it answered. I wrote, 1444. L glove, single microflex, 0.3 seconds. On threat response suppressed. Maintained post, I underlined suppressed. Then I sat with that word the way I'd sat with Helmand. Suppressed isn't the same as absent. Suppressed means it happened, and he chose, not trained, not conditioned, chose to absorb it. To take the threat signal from a hand that has known what an actual threat looks like, that has felt the specific shape of shrapnel in a way that rearranges what fear is and what it isn't, and to stand in it anyway. Basically, for tourists, and for school groups, for a boy who was going to post the video to Instagram with a laughing emoji caption and 40 likes. I thought about General Harwick standing in civilian clothes in the rain, that morning, looking at the glove for 2 minutes and 11 seconds, with that expression I hadn't been able to classify. I classified it now. It wasn't concern, which it wasn't grief. It was the look of a man who knows the weight of something and cannot say so out loud. Because the weight isn't his to name. Because the man carrying, isn't asked for it to be named. Because the man carrying it's decided, somewhere between Helmand and this Tuesday in November, that the carrying is the point. That the wall is the point. That you don't become a wall by not feeling the wind. You become a wall by feeling it and not moving. I closed my notebook at 1500, held it in both hands, but thought about the fact that I have all 10 fingers and have never stood in the cold for 4 hours, while a child laughed at my hat and my body remembered a field in another country. The next rotation was at 1600. Whitmore requested it. The thing about keeping a log for 11 years is that you begin to trust it more than you trust memory, more than you trust instinct, more sometimes than you trust other people. And then something honestly happens that the log cannot hold. Not sort of, because you failed to write it down. I wrote everything down, which I always write everything down. But some things, once written, look like facts, and they aren't facts. They're the outline of something that has no name yet, the pencil sketch where the painting should be. You write, 1612, General Harwick re-enters via service gate, this time with aid. And that's true. That happened. But the true thing underneath the true thing, the thing that made my pen slow and then stop, that doesn't fit in the notation box. Let me try anyway, which he went to Whitmore at the end of the shift. Not to the relief guard, not to the duty sergeant, not to anyone in the chain of command that would make institutional sense. He walked to Whitmore at 1658, 2 minutes before the rotation. While the last tourist bus was pulling away from the mall, and the light was going the particular London way it goes in November, not darkening so much as surrendering, and he stood beside him. Pretty much, not in front. Beside, and he didn't speak immediately. The aide hung back at a distance that suggested training in the specific art of not existing when senior officers require it. Harwick stood basically beside Whitmore, the way men stand beside each other at a funeral. Not touching, I'm facing the same direction, present in the way that doesn't demand anything from the other person's face. 40 seconds, I logged it. Then Harwick said something, and I was 60 feet away behind glass, and I am not a lip reader, but I can read the body. And what Whitmore's body did in response was nothing. A precise and deliberate nothing. He kept his eyes forward. His chin didn't dip. His posture didn't shift. But something changed in the quality of his stillness, the way the quality of a room changes when someone important walks into it, even before you see them. Harwick spoke again, shorter this time. 3 words. Or 4. And Whitmore? And I will write this exactly as I observed it because I don't embellish, I log. Whitmore's left hand tightened on the rifle. Not a flinch, not a tremor. To be fair, a grip. The glove went taut across the knuckles in the spaces where the knuckles used to be, and he held it, and then he released it, and the glove went smooth again, and none of it lasted more than 2 seconds. Harwick nodded. Once, turned, and walked back to his aide. I wrote 1659. Which exchange? Harwick/Whitmore. 40 seconds. L. Which glove grip? 1.8 seconds. Content unknown. I think content unknown. 2 words that have been in my log before. Weather events, obstructed sightlines, conversations, through closed doors. But these 2, honestly, felt different sitting on the page. They felt like the edge of something I was not going to be allowed to see. The rotation came at 1700. Whitmore was relieved. I watched him walk back toward the guardroom with the loose, unhurried gait of a man who has been standing still for 8 hours and is very good at not showing what that costs. His left hand hung at his side. The glove was just a glove again. He didn't roll his shoulders, didn't shake out the tension, didn't do any of the human recalibration things that the body wants after sustained effort. He just walked. I followed at the distance that looks like coincidence. In the lower corridor, he passed Rowe, who was coming the other direction with a clipboard, and the expression of a man confronting paperwork he'd hoped would resolve itself. They didn't speak. But Rowe glanced at the glove, one glance, quick as a blink, and then looked back at his clipboard. Whitmore kept walking. I stopped, which because I'd seen, in that one glance, something I recognized from my own face in mirrors after 11 years of this work. The look of a person who has long since agreed not to say the thing they know, who has made a private treaty with someone else's dignity, who understands that some weight isn't theirs to acknowledge out loud because the person carrying its chosen silence as the architecture of their endurance, not the concealment of it. The, glove was not a secret. It was a boundary, and every person in this building who mattered, Rowe, Harwick, whoever else had looked and looked away, had been honoring it for months, while tourists waved their hands at a man's face, and school children laughed, and the internet made gifs of ceremonial guards blinking, and nobody outside this cold stone building understood that the theater of the Palace Gate had a seam running through it, a quietly human seam, and that on one side of it was the performance, and on the other side was a man who had given 3 fingers to a conflict most of the tourists photographing him couldn't locate on a map, who had then come home, put on the uniform, I guess, taken the post, stood in the rain while a child poked his boot with a plastic dinosaur. I stood in the corridor for a long time. Then I opened my notebook and read back through the day's entries. All of it was accurate. Every timestamp, every observation, every micro-measurement of a glove, accurate and completely beside the point. I turned to a new page. I wrote, what General Harwick said to Whitmore at 1658. 4 words. I believe, I know. I will not write them here. Plus, Then I closed the notebook and put it back in my breast, pocket over my heart. Roe was still in the corridor when I turned around. He hadn't moved. He was looking at me with his clipboard held against his chest, like I'd interrupted something, though I was the one who'd stopped moving first. "Well," he said. "Nothing," I said. "Logging error. I miscounted." He looked at me for a moment with the particular quality of attention that means a man has decided to let you view your version of the story. "Right," he said, and walked on. I stood there. The corridor smelled of stone and boot polish, and the particular cold that lives in old buildings like a sitting tenant. Somewhere above us, through several floors of palace, whatever the crown required was being quietly maintained. Outside, the gate was empty. The post was still there,